Welcome to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church.
Welcome to Means of Grace. I'm Melissa McGill, the Director of Communications for the Western North Carolina Conference, and I'll be your host for this episode. Like many of you, I've been missing our communities of faith gathered together in worship. One of my favorite parts of my job is when I get to visit you in your churches and experience firsthand how God is moving through your faithful ministries. During these months of social distance and a million Zoom meetings, I'm grateful for the technology that has offered us the opportunity to continue to connect. And I'm also grateful for the ways we can reimagine our traditions to fit this current moment, all while honoring our commitment to keep each other safe and, as John Wesley says, do no harm. So today we're taking a trip to Simpson Gillespie United Methodist Church in Charlotte for Park and Praise worship. Like many churches across the conference, they've had to make major adjustments during the pandemic to safely accommodate social distancing. They have recently started a drive-in church service once a month during their normal Sunday hours, which they are also live streaming for those not comfortable coming together in person yet.
You ought to praise Him. Oh, praise.
I've been with this church, my kids are 50, maybe 40 plus years. I like the family type atmosphere that the church gives you. They're warm and welcoming. As we came in as a young family some 40 so odd years ago, and I just stayed with it. In addition to my husband at the time was a member of the church, so I became a part of it, and they, warmly opened their arms up, and we became and stayed thus far. So my 50-plus-year-old children are still part of the church as well.
That's fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit about what we're here doing today?
Okay, we have Park and Praise, because of the pandemic, as we all know. People were doing Zoom, and then we have some older members that's not technically savvy, and we thought of a way that they could not just hear it on the phone, but they could, be a part. So came up with that once a month, third Sunday, as a time that they could come on site and feel like they were connected with the church as much as possible.
Yeah, it looks like you guys have an incredible turnout here. What has it been for your congregation to come back together like this?
It has. We've been ranging in the 50. I'm not quite sure about today. Look like there's more cars anyway, so I think there's more people as well if there's more cars. So the number is growing with the praise and worship service.
Yeah, that's great. What's your favorite part of the worship today?
Favorite part is that seeing each other, for number one. So people are going to each other's cars and greeting, and this togetherness feeling, although we're apart, but still together.
So I think what I would hope that folks take away is that they are missing that they are loved. Just having an opportunity to gather here in this place and space and to see everyone and to just share life and just presence with one another is such a beautiful and wonderful thing. And that's probably the biggest thing that we're missing right now during the pandemic. But as far as the service, we are in this series where we are inviting people to kind of reimagine what God's calling them to be. We've wanted to get back to our traditions, but it has felt more like we want to get back to traditionalism, this veneration and idolization of what was, instead of trying to figure out, how God is using us and shaping us here right now so that we can be built into something more beautiful, more intentional, more healthy, more vulnerable for the future. So my hope is that folks will just continue to engage in that work and day in and day out kind of reinvestigate what God is doing for them and kind of calling us to as a body. But
He's worthy to be praised. Next part says, from the rising of.
We're here in the parking lot of Simpson Gillespie, where the Reverend Darryl Dayson and his church leaders have cleared out the parking lot to make room for the cars of people who will attend worship today. There are already a few cars parked and ready for the service, while the church organist plays an electric piano outside the front door of the church.
Jesus is worthy. He's worthy.
As people were gathering for worship, I had an opportunity to speak with a few of the church leaders who were helping out that morning. Yeah, so if you could just tell me your name.
Gary McClendon.
Everett Folsom.
Nice to meet you guys. So you were telling me a little bit about your history with the church. How did you get started here?
My wife was already raised in the church, and when we met, I started attending, and that's been 25 years ago. Been a member ever since.
Great. How about you, Everett?
I've been here all my life, 62 years. Yep, sure have.
What's your favorite part about going to this church? What do you love about it?
Just the people and how friendly everybody is, and us, just communion and loving each other. That's it.
That's awesome. So can you guys tell us a little bit about what you're out here doing today?
We're parking lot monitors. We make sure everybody get lined up in place where they can get close enough where they can hear and they can see, and it just worked better that way. All right, thank you.
Then the worship service began and everyone got quiet to join in. You might have heard that car horn honking. That's how congregants are able to interact back with Pastor Dayson during the worship.
These unique children of God that have come into this place and space desiring to see God and to worship God with one another. So I thank you for being able to be here to gather in this time and space with one another. Though we're still called to remain just a little bit separate, we gathered in the body and the presence of God here in this place.
Pastor Dayson is in the middle of a sermon series called Reset, centered around the question of how we as the church and as individuals respond to these unprecedented times. Will we just resume, or will we reset and create something better than what we had before? Today, the gospel lesson is John 15, 1-8, Jesus' story of the vine and the branches.
Abide in me as I abide in you, just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. Now that isn't quite so hard for us, because naturally within inside of us, we desire what is good. We desire love. We desire relationship. Within each and every one of us is this imago Dei that is always desiring to come closer to the one who has created them.
Sometimes this passage can be intimidating with its pruning of branches not bearing fruit. In this message, Pastor Dayson takes lessons from how vine growers actually grow grapes to further this biblical metaphor to apply it to our lives today. How do we continue to cultivate deep roots in such a shallow season? He takes it back to the original Greek. The vine grower doesn't immediately cast away the branches connected to the vine, but lifts it up to help it bear fruit.
We want to understand it as the Father, the vine grower, casting away that thing that does not bear fruit. But we don't realize that God does not want to cast us away if we read this in the text within its original language in the Greek. That God is not seeking to cast away immediately that which isn't growing fruit, but to figure out why it's not growing fruit. So if you do a little bit of research with vine growers, you see that most commonly vines that get a little too low to the ground end up not bearing fruit how it's supposed to, because of the dirt that is caking it isn't allowing it to mature and to maturate as well as it needs to and as it can. So the vine grower needs to switch up how it's growing, to take it off of the ground and to put it in a higher place. And how the vine grower does that is that the vine grower takes some wood and puts the vine on the wood. Y'all catch that? Some of y'all still think I'm talking about some sticks or twigs. The vine grower takes the vine that's too close to the ground and finds some wood and puts it on the wood. If you have a scriptural imagination, you will come to imagine what this looks like. That the vine grower is taking it and putting it close to the cross. That is just what we need to do when we read our scriptures, is to not just read it for the words that are there, but to imagine what Christ is trying to tell us. So he switches up the place that it's in and brings it closer to its source that it needs to be in. And that's what we need to do in our very own lives, to remember that we are connected, remember that we are desiring to abide with God, but to also switch up our lives so that we may find how Christ is calling us to reset our lives.
After the service, a few congregants got out of their cars to catch up, all wearing masks and maintaining safe distance. We caught up with a few of them.
What's your name? I'm Faye Dayson. I'm the pastor's mom.
Awesome. So great. What was your thoughts of the worship today? Like, what did you like the best?
Well, I like that we come together as a community and support just our community, our church, our pastor, and just open for everyone. So that's what I like, just the freeness of it all.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What do you think about meeting this way during the pandemic? What do you like about it?
Well, it's just an unprecedented time for everyone. However, we have to find ways to meet and social, apart. But it was hard at first, but we have found a way to make it work. And I think that this is just part of the new normal right now.
And of course, Pastor Dayson was generous with his time and spoke to me and my producer, Andy, for a few minutes after the service as well. I know that throughout the course of the pandemic, how have you been seeing people continue to connect or not connect? And how did Park and Praise come about out of that?
Yeah, we've mainly seen folks connect via phone calls. I'm in a community with folks who have, for the most part, known each other for years and are just really good at being intentional with sending phone calls, even just writing letters and cards to one another. So that's been really cool. But as far as what we've done with the congregation, we've had a few opportunities to do service projects within our community. A couple weeks ago, we had a drive-through pizza party. So folks would just come through from the community and just get a free pizza and some words of encouragement and then go on. We've done COVID testing a couple times also. But outside of that, just being in worship with one another has been really cool. Because when we started off, pretty much no one in church had heard of Zoom. No one's really connected to YouTube or Facebook, but we've seen some of our eldest and most wise members finally get email addresses, learn how to work Zoom on our own, and start connecting through things like Instagram and Facebook. So that's been really cool to see. Just folks kind of step up and find ways to connect with each other in a different way. Mm-hmm.
Great. So tell me a little bit about, for some of our people who aren't in Charlotte, tell us about the community that the church is in and how the ways that you guys continue to connect with your community.
Yeah, so the West Charlotte area is a historically Black, African-American side of Charlotte, and there's been a lot of just beautiful communities who have been in this area for such a long time. And what we have tried to do over the course of the pandemic is to just to connect with folks by just being present, giving folks opportunity to come by safely, whether it be the drive-through pizza party where folks just came through in their car, everybody's masked and all that stuff, and then COVID testing, and then we have linked our space to students to come and to do their coursework, elementary school kids, but just letting people to see and to know that that our church isn't just some siloed off community, but one that is in the community and wants to find out the ways in which the community wants to be supported and to help support what the community needs. And so it's been really fun. It's been really cool to see the congregation step up in their way, because you don't always expect older congregations to do that, but we've been really intentional. Mm-hmm.
I also want to ask about the blessing box that you mentioned during the sermon. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so about 2 or so months ago, there was a Girl Scout, and I'm forgetting her name right now, unfortunately, but she contacted one of our church members, and she was doing one of her Scout projects. So she had the idea of doing a blessing box, and it was presented to the church, and we thought that would just be another really good opportunity for folks to just know that we're here, and don't just want them to come and be a part of worship services, but want to know that they're connected to our community too, and that any way that we we want to support. So that got built this past Friday and Saturday, and our hope is that the word will get out and folks will know that it's here and just come by whenever you can and to get what they need.
I got a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind. So with the service here today, obviously a different format than what you're traditionally used to. What's the biggest challenge or the biggest difference between leading a service like this one outside of the building in the parking lot where everyone's in their cars versus the more traditional service where everyone's in the church, in the pews, singing and dancing?
Right. I think the biggest challenge is biggest challenges were trying to make sure we were setting everything up safely, because we were encouraging everybody to stay in cars, everybody's driving cars, and making sure folks don't have chances to get hurt in that way. But the other half of it really was just trying to figure out how we're going to do technology, because I have a community of folks several folks, about a month into the pandemic, they called me and said, "You're probably not going to see me to 2021 regardless of what anybody says at all." So being able to provide a space and time for people to gather once a month to just see each other and to worship with one another, but also to have an opportunity for folks who would not be able to come but to still be a part of the service. So those are really the most difficult components to make sure that there's something being offered here, but also that folks were able to experience and participate at home. And it is an odd thing to worship outside. I know that's like what our tradition comes from, like John Wesley and the gang, George Whitefield, like preaching out on lawns and stuff like that. But I started off hating it, but I'm starting to like it a little bit more now. But it's cool. It presents a different opportunity and kind of like hermeneutic for how we preach what we preach, because these speakers don't carry forever, but it carries enough to know that there will be something that's heard in earshot. So trying to find ways to communicate the gospel that is faithful and nourishing, but also can sound new and fresh to folks who are in the community who may just be walking by has been a really fun and cool challenge.
I got one more question for you, and this one's actually just more related to what I heard you talking about in your sermon, but you used a really great analogy with the grapevines and how they are maintained to produce, the most fruit. And you mentioned how one of the grapevines, the ones that don't grow, the ones that are lower to the ground, those are the ones that need to be lifted up and need to have special attention. Why is it important for communities at large, for the capable in the communities at large, to be able to make space for those who need extra attention?
I think it's important because it is core to our faith. And if we look at the ministry of Jesus, he was very intentional with being with those who are on the margins, those who, quote unquote, may not be as capable or have the abilities that other communities may have as far as access and power, shelter, sustenance, and all of those things. And for me, I believe when we see groups or communities who may not be able to live into what they're capable of, to bear the type of fruit that we know that they can bear, because all of us can. It is important for us to do the work that we can to lift them up, to find out what ways that they have been stunted, either by those that are of means, those that are of power, and to find ways to give and share what a lot of us end up hoarding for ourselves. And that is really the work of the church and the work of the gospel. But it's also the hardest thing we can do, because it takes something from us, or it requires us to give and to see and to.
Clearly, there are many challenges facing us and the church these days. But I find encouragement in the fact that even though our buildings have been closed, that's never been the heart of the church anyway. The church is still being the church, living into its calling, whether on Zoom, in the community, or in the parking lot. Now is the time that we need to work even harder to create community, to give with more empathy, to further extend a helping hand to those in need. Pastor Dayson and his church at Simpson Gillespie have shown just one small way. They're continuing to create that space for worshipers.
Praise Him. you believe that, let's give the Lord some praise on this morning. I hear you. Come on, let's give him praise.
This was Pastor Dayson's prayer for his congregation, and I think it's so fitting for all of us as we navigate these times together. Lord, we are all connected to you. We are part of your vine, and our desire is to bear fruit. So we ask as we dive into your word that you may help us to see how you are calling us to not only bear fruit, but to bear more and more fruit, to flourish. We lift this up to you, the one who has created us and who is redeeming and sustaining us. Amen.
Thank you for listening to Means of Grace, a podcast produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. We hope you enjoy listening to these podcasts and use them as a way to stay connected to our community. Remember to subscribe to Means of Grace for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us an honest rating and a review. It helps others find this podcast. Follow the WNCC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WNCCUMC. Once again, that's at WNCCUMC. Means of Grace is produced by the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.